This presentation will introduce to the use of creative and art-based activities, such as music and dance, theater and drama, storytelling and poetry, painting and drawing, art photography and video art making, in community-based MHPSS programs in emergencies. This presentation, as such, refers to Chapter 6 of the IOM Manual on Community-Based MHPSS in Emergencies and Displacement. Especially for this module, and if you are interested in the subject, I recommend you read the chapter, which contains a wealth of additional information, examples and references. Thanks to this module, MHPSS managers should learn how to design and monitor art-based and creative activities in a MHPSS program. These activities are relevant to MHPSS because they have the potential to act on social and cultural determinants of health, like social capital and life skills. But they also have a positive effect at the organic level, containing the negative effects of protracted stress and empowering immune responses, as neuroendocrine and neurological studies suggest. Finally, new studies on neuroaesthetics established a correlation between artistic vision and production and the stimulation of mirror neurons towards empathy and attunement. By effect of these practices are expression and relaxation, symbolic re-elaboration of painful predicaments, agency, empathy, life skills, relational skills, problem solving through role-playing, and critical thinking. Arts, with their capacity to express in metaphors, feelings, thoughts and emotions, even the most painful and unspeakable ones, can transform suffering and negative experiences in artistic productions of individual, aesthetic, social and cultural significance. Art and creativity are central to MHPSS models of work. From one side, they link body and mind in a creative action that is relational and aims at communication, is rooted in culture, and creates cultural objects, as we said, such as songs, sculptures, paintings, plays and videos. Moreover, these are activities that link individual expression with group building and societal discourses, and that are rooted on resilience and use suffering to learn from the experience. Finally, art-based activities can give a voice to subcultural groups and marginalized identities because of their metaphorical approach, that is protective in a way, and the interest their cultural objects can raise in the general population. For a psychosocial perspective, art-based and creative activities act simultaneously on individual expression, with painting, singing, for instance, in group building, think about choirs, music ensembles, drama troupes, peaceful discussion and identification of problems within the group. Think about such practices at theater forums, or the discussion that are involved in setting the program for a concert, for an ensemble, and so on. And finally, there is the element of social communication from the group to the outside world, through show, performances, videos, and so on. Art-based and creative activities are rooted in the agency of communities and exist in any social context, including those affected by violent crisis and displacement. Arts-based and creative activities encompass a series of practices and psychosocial functions distributed throughout the full spectrum of MHPSS in emergencies, throughout the pyramid. While different practices can act at all 4 levels of interventions, for instance, drama therapy is a specialized service that should be used, however, with caution and only when professional expertise exists in the context of emergencies. Different forms of drama, by contrary, music and also art, but also movement, can be used to inform one-to-one counseling and support groups. Art, drama and music can be used also to inform about basic services and to conduct assessments. Yet, most forms of art-based activity in the MHPSS pyramid stand at the 2nd and 3rd level, the ones of community support and eventually support groups. Theater and performative arts are among the artistic expressions that have enjoyed more declinations in community development and mental health and psychosocial support programs in emergencies. This might be due to the fact that theater and drama are usually based on physical and emotional manifestations directly linked to real problems and actual experiences affecting individuals and groups in the communities, with a particular emphasis also on emotional memories. Theatre and dance pay more importance to relational aspects and group building because they are ensemble works and need an audience by default, which is a relation with an outgroup, to take place. Any theatre activity results from an urgency of some kind, as many scholars say in this domain, and is about working on limits and borders, that are the limits and borders that very often individuals and groups have to trespass in an emergency situation. Social theatre is based upon bodies and relationship, but it is distanced from purely therapeutical approaches and solidly aesthetic goals. Social theatre, which is one declination of theatre, is an instrument of collective action through laboratories, workshops and performances which have the goal of healing and heightening the quality of social interactions. MHPSS program should mobilize human and financial resources to ensure that these practices are kept alive during the emergency, allowing theatre ensembles, dance groups, music bands to continue producing their artistic creation and performances with more explicitly healing and reparative objectives. According to the situation, MHPSS managers might decide to support the reactivation of existing artistic practices or pre-existing artistic practices, or to initiate new art-based and creative activities in camp, psychosocial hubs, transit centers and those communities based on the existing expertise and the identified needs. Usually, the integration of these two approaches, reactivating the existing and offering new activities, has proved to be the most effective way to address various psychosocial needs in the affected communities. In both cases, continuity is key for this psychosocial intervention to be successful. One-off recreational session can be entertaining and mood-boosting, but can hardly reach sustainable psychosocial objectives. MHPSS managers should follow steps to promote creative and arts-based activities in emergency. The first one is mapping of existing and pre-existing arts-based and creative practices, also resources, individual resources in camps and those communities, including groups of artists, popular ensembles and music bands, as well as safe location and accessible venues where activities and performance can take place. The second is reactivating and protecting what you have mapped. Existing and pre-existing artistic practices, activities and groups. The MHPSS program can provide material support to local artists and artistic groups, can provide safe venues, can provide equipment and instruments, training, and all these things can be offered in kind or be part of a barter. So you offer something to groups in exchange to collective performances, or of workshops they will offer in the artistic specialty to children, or activities in the community. For how to prioritize which initiatives to support, see the list in the screen now. The next step is mobilizing local artists for social cohesion purposes in emergencies. Available skills, talents and energies should be mobilized to respond to psychosocial needs of affected communities. You have to offer training sessions on arts as a form of social actions or psychosocial support, and maybe small-scale incentives for artistic programs that are addressed or involve vulnerable groups, or they focus on specific problems related with your MHPSS programs. Other forms of engagement can be found in the list in the screen. Promoting art-based initiative is then another step. These initiatives are promoted to establish an active network of local groups, artists and cultural activists. These are usually program-facilitated activities, which might include fostering participation of displaced people in public events and exhibitions in host communities, and also of calling for contests and campaigns to facilitate series of events in different locations, informing local authorities on these public gatherings for authorization and safe execution, but mainly trying to promote displaced people artistic production in this fora. You have also to include art-based focused intervention for people with severe mental health disorder in action plans. At the third level of the pyramid, psychosocial services, art-based activities must be structured with a series of safeguards and boundaries. MHPSS manager may not be an expert in applied arts, and therefore you have to rely on external expertise in designing such therapeutic interventions. The most validated adaptation of arts-based practices into healing and social support programs such as drama therapy, art therapy, playback theater, theater of the oppressed, dance movement therapy, and so on, are largely based on Western artistic practices, cultural tradition, and therapeutical model. Their use in other cultural tradition and specific emergency settings should be attentively discussed with local practitioners and affected communities. Categorization of artistic practices for levels of psychosocial services can be fluid and customized according to the psychosocial needs and availability of qualified experts in that specific community. However, terms and concepts related to psychosocial application of artistic disciplines should be used consistently in your MHPSS program. In fact, art therapies used as specialized service and artistic healing practices used at the focus level of services for individuals affected by severe or moderate mental disorder are often erroneously attributed to creative and entertaining practices that properly belong to first and second level of the Interagency Standing Committee pyramid. This means that very often you will say that in your program there is art therapy or drama therapy happening, when in fact what is happening are just community support through recreational activities or artistic activities, as we saw before, but these don't have a direct therapeutical scheme, model, protocol, and intervention. On the other side, sometimes we do psychodrama in the community, knowing that psychodrama is a very peculiar practice that need a lot of expertise to be expleted, and therefore cannot be done without the proper setting in a, let's say, in a camp setting in the open air, by instance. So we have to be very careful about the terminology we use and the practices that are actually used and how we call them. The participation of target populations in art-based activities might need to be initially selective and or segregated, by instance for cultural groups or for gender groups, because intellectual creativity and body performances are expressed differently exactly according to gender, age, social status, and culture. Adult males, by instance, might not meaningfully engage in art crafting and painting in workshop, while singing and dancing in some cultures are better venues for them, or maybe playing music or reciting poems in public gatherings, as it is often in the Middle East. Likewise, women might find difficult to publicly engage in bodily expressions, while they would eagerly perform among themselves and in small groups, and that again depends on the culture, but not only the culture, also the subculture and the social state of the person. Therapeutic interventions of artistic nature, like art therapies, need very qualified experts, as we already said, to perform them. Do not think that any game or theater practice can be used as a therapy for people with severe mental disorder, and it is always necessary to adopt safeguards and be true to the nature of the intervention. And yet to require, in this case, the professionalization of the staff who is working on higher levels of the psychosocial pyramid. Also, you have to call practices, as we said before, with their names. Psychodrama is not games, games are not psychodrama. However, transformative languages and practice of arts, along with an increasingly degree of trust between the psychosocial mobile teams, community focal points, and affected communities, might contribute to break some social barriers and individual attitudes that prevent participation and full enjoyment of artistic expressions. Professionalization will also help avoiding the risks that are concerned with the use of these practices for therapeutical, direct therapeutical, clinical purposes.